Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk. I am normally not working on beer and health, but fiber identification. So it's very interesting for me to be here, and I hope I can make a valuable contribution. So I normally work with the high throughput analysis of fibers, and as thus I am mostly going to talk about a microarray-based high throughput method for polysaccharide profiling in brewing. So I'm going to give a little background on why we do it, talk about the technology and proof of concept of the analysis of beers, and then a little bit on the future prospects. And when I talk about fibers in this talk, it's always polysaccharides that are resistant to digestion and absorption. So here we have a barley grain, and when brewing beer, this is one of the main components that we've already heard a couple of times. If you make a cross section, you can see here you have the majority of the grain is the endosperm, and it contains large amounts of starch, which is the primary sugar component, but for a fiber perspective it's not very interesting because it's usually degraded down in the fermentation procedure. But if we look a little more in detail in the grain, we can see all these small compartments. It's all the cells, and all plant cells are surrounded by a plant cell wall, which is a very complex sugar composition. And at least in barley grains and grains used in beer production, in our experience, the most common fibers found are beta-glucan, this one up here, also called mixed linkage glucan, have arabinoxylan, see some structure here, and mannan. And these sugar chains, this is just a very small subsection. They can stretch for like hundreds of sugars, and some of them, especially arabinoxylan and mannan, can have a lot of different branching points along the chain. So of course, when we look at the grains, we already know, at least as I said before, the different fibers which are contained in different grain types. But after the brewing process, there's not really that much known about what polysaccharides are left and in which amounts in the beer. So, of course, this is very interesting because there's been reported numerous health benefits and potential benefits also in disease treatments. Here's a review from 2010 summarizing a huge amount of different glycans, polysaccharides, that could have some beneficial effects through consumption. Again, especially the beta-glucan is very interesting. First of all, it can have some undesirable effects in cereal processing application, such as the malting and brewing. But on top of that, it has been proven to be very, very beneficial for human diets. And we have an FDA claim that claims that if you consume at least 3 grams of beta-glucan a day, it will be effective in lowering blood total and LDL cholesterol. Another thing that's also been more and more interesting in the recent years is non-alcoholic beverages. The alcohol consumption in the world in general is declining, but in general the non-alcoholic beers are really a booming industry at the moment. And in the alcohol-free beers, there's much bigger potential to claim health effects due to their fiber content. But in order to claim anything about all these fibers, you need to have some testing to figure out what are the individual glycans there are or polysaccharides in the beers. There are several kits available, commercial kits to test for them. There is one for the beta-glucan, for instance, but it only tests for one, and they are all time-consuming, quite expensive, and low throughput. And usually they will only give information on one specific type of polysaccharide. So we were contacted by Kennes Institute Beer, by Afje Sirksman, to help try and maybe adapt the techniques that we use in our lab to identify polysaccharides and plant cell walls to beers. And we then tried to adapt the analysis of beer to carbohydrate microarrays, which is like the core procedure that we work with in Copenhagen University, where I work. And basically, I guess the microarray system is often has been used for many years for gene expression and gene discovery and so on. And within the recent years, it's also been adapted to investigate carbohydrates, mostly in humans, but also in plants. Has started a lot the recent years. So what the machine basically does, it can deposit samples, in this case some different fibers, and then you can detect them with antibodies that can recognize specific epitopes of the glycans, and you can visualize them with some fluorescent and get a signal out of it. The microarray machine can print a huge amount of samples in a very tiny area. So this is like a normal microscope slide. It's like 7 × 2 centimeters approximately. And down here you can get the special one with 16 areas. And in one little area here, like a 6 millimeter × 6 millimeter area, you can have around 1,000 spots on array. So it can be 300 samples with multiple biological and printing replicates. And just when you print, if you just print ink, then this is just some examples of color printed, how it actually looks, how the samples are deposited in a specific pattern you can choose. But of course, for this to really work, we need an extensive library of antibodies that can recognize the different fibers that could potentially be in beers. Since we work in Copenhagen with this, we have this extensive library recognizing all sorts of substructures of plant cell walls, and thus will also be able to adapt directly to beer, to the fibers in beers. For instance, we can see here the 3 fibers I mentioned earlier, mannan, beta-glucan, and arabinoxylan. We all have some antibodies that target specific areas within the. So this antibody targets the backbone. If it has this is arabinose sugars on the side, then this will bind. And up here, the beta-glucan, this kink in the chain is also recognizable by an antibody. So we can use these to identify the fiber content in beer. And then, yeah, this is just some pictures of how the actual lab looks and the machinery. So these are the actual microarray robots and how they are loaded with these small glass slides inside. So if we take an example where we want to investigate some beers for fiber contents, have here 15 different beers, and they basically just go directly into the machine. There's no processing done or anything. We just take the directly out of the bottle, and the machine will then it works a little like an inkjet printer. So it has this print head that goes over all the substrates and kind of sprays the samples on it in like an orderly fashion, like seen here. And then what the machine can do, I guess the power of the machine is it very quickly generates a huge amount of copies that are identical, and then we can add the antibodies to each of them. For instance, we can take one, add an antibody recognizing xylan, and take another one, add an antibody that recognizes the beta-glucan. So if we look at, for instance here, the blue and the red beer, they might have a composition like maybe like this. So the blue one have a lot of beta-glucan and some xylan, whereas the red one only has the xylan. So when we add the xylan antibody and the beta-glucan antibody, we will get signals similar to this. So we get a weak signal for xylan in the blue beer, a strong one in the red. For beta-glucan, it's a strong one in the blue beer and nothing in the red. So we will get, at this point, the procedure is like, it's not, we cannot really quantify the amounts yet. We're working on it. So this mostly will get results that gives the relative amounts within the sample set of the beers. And this is how the actual microarrays looks. These are a little bigger than the ones I showed before. They contain a much larger sample amount. This is the beers we have analyzed for the Kennis Institute beer. Sorry. And here we have, I think, 350 different beer samples has been analyzed in these arrays that are like 2 times 2 centimeters. So the output of the procedure is a semi-quantitative information about the relative abundance of polysaccharides in the beer samples. We are working to make make them quantitative with internal polysaccharide standards. It's one of the big things that people really would like to know is the actual amount in the beer. So at the moment we are right in the process of that, and it seems to be it should be possible in the near future to make a quantitative addition to this procedure. And then just a little bit about the speed. It's quite quick. We can take these, for instance, 350 samples, and then it takes the machine 10 hours to produce all the arrays, and it only uses 20 microliters of a sample, so it can be very tiny amounts. And in general, the whole procedure takes around 2 days to get the finished data set. So I just wanted to show then the proof of concept. So we print, this is the actual data output we get. So it's not really important what's written, it's more that we have all the different antibodies listed on the top and all the different beer samples down the line here. So this is an experiment containing around 60 different beers. And this data set will then can answer the question of which polysaccharides are left in the beer after the brewing process. But just to make it a little more visible, we've done some PCA clustering. So here we can see this is 20 known international beers that has been analyzed, and we can see how they spread out in the PCA score plot. And there are some there's some groups that we can identify based on the similarities. 4 groups here: blue, yellow, green, and red. And I can just show like a hierarchical clustering here on the side, so you can see how they also cluster out in similarities. And we're still working on to get more information on. It's difficult to get the information, at least on the labels, why they are like they are here. One obvious thing was, of course, to look at the grains used for brewing them. So here we can see that the red group here, cluster south, is wheat beers with primarily wheat malt and then some barley. So that seems to be a deciding factor, at least for the Erdinger brews and the Paulaner beer that are listed down here. However, we see also that we have barley in both ends of the screen, so there are a lot of other factors that makes this spread. And in the future, we hope to get some more information. I guess it could be the different yeast strains, what enzymes has been added, and so on. But I think we definitely can discover some differences in the beers. If we look at, we have Green Tuborg and some Carlsberg beers up here. They are like light pilsners. And then we have Heineken, it's listed over here. And at least to me, or to us in the lab as average beer consumers, in our head, those are like similar beers. So we were a little surprised to see them so far away from each other that they don't cluster together. And if you do a comparison of those two, we can see here that actually we have some of the antibodies that really has a large difference between the beers, and they happen to be the 3 fibers I talked about earlier. And we see that especially the beta-glucan content is much higher in a Heineken beer than in a Green Tuborg or a Carlsberg. And the same goes for Mannan and a little bit for the arabinoxylon. So if this is due to, I don't know if Carlsberg and Tuborg adds maybe enzymes to their beers to get rid of the beta-glucan, but at least the technique can be used to identify the differences and the levels of the different polysaccharides. And I guess according to the internal standards we have been working on so far, a beer like Heineken might contain around 2-3 grams of beta-glucan in a liter of beer. So it should be up in a range where it can actually fit the FDA description of how much you should take in per day. Yes, so in the future, we hope to get some more sophisticated data analysis and integration with other information, so we can identify what is the key steps in the beer that decides how much beta-glucan, how much mannan, and also if there is some what you can maybe do to increase these amount of fiber levels in the beer. Because of that, we would very much like to also analyze not just the final bottle product, but also different steps in the brewing process. So maybe it's possible to identify particularly crucial steps for the degradation of the fibers in the beers. Of course, also get the internal standards so we can actually say what is the fiber amount. We hope that would be finished very soon. And then it will also be interesting to see, for instance, non-alcoholic beers, if there is a possibility to enhance the fiber content in the beer in relation to claiming health claims for the beverages. So, yes, and I'm in the end. I would particularly thank the Kennes Institute Beer and Avje Sieksma. They have partly funded all the research we've been doing so far, and we are still collaborating on getting more elaborate information on the health claims. And then University of Copenhagen, where I work, William Willits, Louise Nanke, Peter Ulskov, and Henrik Sigumfeldt, who has helped on the project and trying to investigate the data. So, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's very interesting. Now we move to a different issue. So we move to a more clinical aspects of the moderate intake of beer. Professor Rosa Lamuela from the University of Barcelona